Tesla's AI Day was filled with incredible reveals that honestly, I wasn't really prepared for. And while most of the world is focused on the updated Optimus robot, the Tesla team talked about a few innovations that have much bigger consequences. Yes, even bigger than the robot, because remember, Optimus will need to do things like gather data, identify objects, plan a route and some actions, and then execute that plan in a safe manner. And to do all that, the robot will have to rely on the same kinds of sensing, controls, software, and AI as Tesla's cars, which are actually robots in their own right. My undergrad degree is in electrical engineering, and I have a grad degree in computer vision and image processing, so I love geeking out over big technology reveals like the ones in Tesla's AI Day. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name's Alex, and I focus on breaking down the most advanced technologies in the world to help more people understand them and even invest in them if you're into that sort of thing. Alright, your time is valuable, and I can't wait to talk about AI Day, so let's get right into it. To me, the single most foundational thing that the Tesla team talked about is how far they've come with auto-labeling. Labeling is the step where the AI looks at everything in the scene and tries to decide what it is. That's important because a computer can't really decide what to do until it really knows what it's looking at. For example, we saw the robot be able to identify its own arms in its field of view and label them in teal. Nearby humans were labeled in green. I'm sure Optimus follows some basic rules, like maintaining a certain distance from anything in green or having to stay under a certain speed when something green enters its field of view. But that only works if it can do a good job correctly identifying and labeling humans in the first place. The ground is colored in purple. Let me be a little more specific. As Optimus looks around, whatever he labels as a surface that he can plan a path through is colored purple. Likewise, whatever Optimus identifies as its objective is labeled in pink. Plants were labeled in pink when its job was to water them, and the small metal beams were labeled pink when its job was to pick them up and organize them. It's important to realize that the same magic is happening in the FSD software in Tesla's cars. The 8 cameras are providing videos to Tesla's FSD chip in real time, and the software has to decide what each pixel in the scene actually is. Is it a road that the car can drive on? Label it purple. Is it a sidewalk or other flat surface that the car can't drive on? Label it red. Is it another car? Label it blue. All decisions around navigation and safety rely on getting these labels correct. And to do that, Tesla showed us a few really cool tricks up its sleeve. The first trick is reconstructing a scene using data from multiple trips across multiple cars. The basic idea is to check all the previous trips that any Tesla has made in a given area, to see how those cars labeled their surroundings in those scenes. Since all the video data is passed through the same labeler system, every Tesla should agree on where the lanes are, and the curbs, and the traffic lights, and the medians, and so on. Then, if you know where you are in that same scene, you should also agree on those same things in your own field of view. That's what all the colored lines are in these videos, pre-computed labels of everything in the scene according to what Tesla already knows based on trips before that one. Then your Tesla updates, adds to, and verifies those same labels. I want to spend a little time talking about the different challenges of auto-labeling and how Tesla is solving them in a way that no other company can really reproduce. This is part of Tesla's special sauce. Let's start with lanes. Lanes are really tricky because they split and merge, and intersections don't label all the possible ways that traffic can move between them. And unlike other types of objects in the scene, lanes are also part of the road, so just labeling them purple isn't really good enough to help the AI plan its route. So what Tesla did was develop a language for describing lanes, intersections, and the road network that they form. It's called LaneNet, and it has 2 really special properties. The first property is that it also encodes the geometry of the lane graph. Said another way, this language describes what ending lanes can be accessed from each starting lane of an intersection, and the length of the road and the radius and directions of the turns that the car would have to make to hit the next node in this network. Combine that with what we just talked about, where Tesla is using previous data from other cars. That means that when the next Tesla rolls up to a busy intersection, chances are it will already have all the combinations of paths that it can take depending on where it wants to go, even if it's dark or foggy or rainy. Then as the Tesla goes through that intersection, it updates, adds to, and verifies the labels for each lane for all future Teslas, same as before. That's what all these teal lines are in these clips. The second really cool property of LaneNet is that it is actually a language, or at least it has the properties of one. That means that Tesla can leverage all the bleeding edge work being done by other companies in areas of AI like natural language processing and semantics. Language and semantics are huge areas of research in the AI world right now, and whenever there's a breakthrough, chances are Tesla will be able to use it as part of this lane and path prediction software. And again, this is something that affects Tesla's cars and Optimus, which would use these same tools to plan paths through crowded factory floors, just as an example. And again, all of this is happening automatically in a world where most data labeling by other companies is still being done manually by humans. What would take a human around 3.5 hours to label, Tesla's auto-labeling machines can do in under 6 minutes. Labeling 10,000 trips worth of lanes would take a human around 5 million hours to do. That's about 570 years. I don't want to be the guy with that job. But it takes Tesla's auto-labeler just 12 hours to label those same 10,000 trips. Oh yeah, and the labels produced this way are much more accurate and precise. Tesla reserves human labeling for clips where the computer wasn't very confident, like in bad weather, or in a partially blocked scene, or in clips where the driver had to intervene, which could mean something in the scene was misclassified and incorrectly labeled. That's a lot less data for humans to label, and also the most important data for them to label, since those are the cases where a computer was most likely to get it wrong. This is a very smart way of handling things on Tesla's part. Alright, when it comes to labeling, lanes are one of the biggest challenges. Another big one is volumetric occupancy. What the heck does that mean? Volumetric occupancy is where you chunk up the world around you into tiny cubes, and then try to label what's in each cube. So you have a volume, and you're labeling it according to what occupies it. Volumetric occupancy lets you do two important things. The first is that it lets you label something once in 3D space, instead of having to label that thing in every camera that sees it. So when a Tesla sees a car in front of it, for example, that car gets labeled a certain way, and that label shows up for any camera feed that sees that car. That's very different from how it used to work just a few years ago, where things were labeled image by image or camera by camera, and then extra work was done to make sure that the labels were consistent across images and across cameras. But we actually saw Tesla do this kind of labeling in 3D space during last year's AI Day, so here's what changed for this most recent one. Notice that all the points in this 3D image are really fine, whether they're a static building, or a sidewalk, or a pedestrian. Everything in the scene is being computed at the same high resolution, even though we know that we don't care about everything in the scene equally. We want to pay more attention to things like pedestrians and cars and road signs, and we can pay a little less attention to things like fixed buildings and trees, just as an example. So one thing that Tesla's volumetric occupancy AI does is assign each cube a color, just like we saw with labeling, except this time, instead of asking what an object is, the color, or label, describes the potential movement of whatever is in the occupied cube. So, tan cubes can be buildings, or mailboxes, or lampposts, but they're all tan because those volumes are occupied with things that don't move and won't move in the future. Red volumes are occupied by things that don't move or move very slowly, like a pedestrian or a parked bus, but once the bus starts to move, it turns blue, indicating that it's now moving and predicted to continue moving in a certain way. What this lets the Tesla do is spend more computer power on the volumes that matter more, like the ones colored red or blue, as opposed to the tan ones. Said another way, Tesla won't bother trying to calculate a building's exact location down to the centimeter, or predicting the motion of a building that won't end up moving. It'll reserve that compute power for volumes occupied by things that are much more likely to move. So the colors tell the self-driving AI where it should pay the most attention. And again, we see the same kind of volumetric occupancy model for Optimus, where static objects are tan cubes and green cubes are occupied by people, indicating that those are the volumes that the robot needs to pay much more attention to and try to plan paths around them accordingly. Alright, the next step is to determine what's actually going on in the volumes that the AI actually does care about. So Tesla's AI predicts a set of possible future paths for every potential mover in the scene. In the case of somebody running a red light, that means recognizing that one potential path is them crossing through our lane and us getting ready to act accordingly. Sure enough, as soon as the car's nose starts to turn into our lane, it's time to apply some brakes and then turn to avoid the car in the safest way possible given the rest of our surroundings. In this second case, somebody is actually parked in the left lane of this road, while the person on the right is transitioning from moving to slowing down at a traffic light. Because the Tesla was able to correctly classify the car on the left as parked, not just momentarily stopped, it knew to switch lanes instead of staying behind this parked car forever. Alright, we've covered a lot so far. Automatically labeling objects, the language of lanes, classifying volumetric occupancy to decide where to pay the most attention, and even predicting the potential future paths of everything in the scene that we think can move. That's all fine and dandy, but everything we just talked about assumes that Tesla has enough data to train the AI correctly in the first place. What do they do when they can't collect enough data? For example, what if a specific scene is exceptionally rare, like the one we just saw where the car was parked in the left lane of a busy street? Or what if it's too dark? Or there's bad weather? Or there's just too much stuff blocking the camera? How does Tesla overcome bad data or not enough data to train and test their AI for these very specific cases? The answer is that they simulate it. Tesla's photorealistic simulator actually isn't new. They spent a lot of time talking about it at their previous AI day. But what is new is how quickly they can generate very complex 3D scenes and training data. For example, a busy city intersection might take 2 weeks for artists and game creators to build out and populate with traffic. But Tesla is able to do it in just 10 minutes using all the data and labels and AI models we just talked about. For example, they can use LaneNet to determine the lanes of the simulated environment, and then automatically place the right decals and street signs at each intersection. Then they can change the surrounding trees and buildings to generate similar datasets, increasing the amount of data that they have for a specific scenario that they may not have seen enough times in real life. They can also change the vehicle and pedestrian traffic patterns to train and test the AI under different situations within the same location. Taking it one step further, they can also randomize the weather and the visibility to measure the AI's performance in low light, poor visibility, or when water and puddles are causing unusual reflections in the road. And of course, since this is a simulation, Tesla can turn labels on or off, depending on whether they want to use the data for training or testing respectively. Ultimately, Tesla can use this simulator to create an up-to-date virtual world filled with digital twins of every road that they've mapped, complete with accurate labels for many of the things that Tesla's cars would see when they're at that scene. Then, when they notice that they don't have enough data for a given location, they can simulate it with a wide variety of variations to strategically beef up their data library as needed. This means limitless training data for Tesla's full self-driving.
And now, to come full circle, because we generated all these tile sets from ground truth data, they contain all the weird intricacies from the real world, and we can combine that with the procedural, visual, and traffic variety to create limitless, targeted data for the network to learn from.
Which is incredibly important because with more data comes better FSD performance. It's very important to note that only Tesla has access to this data, since it's their cars that are out collecting it in the real world. You can't just find a comparable dataset on Google or easily recreate it. That gives Tesla a huge leg up on anyone else trying to solve this problem. And as their AI gets trained and tested on more and more data, it gets better at predicting the movement of everything in the scene and planning its own movement accordingly. Now we've come full circle. So hopefully this episode helped you understand the crazy innovations that the Tesla team shared during AI Day. We've talked about labeling everything in the scene, including complex lane networks. We've talked about volumetric occupancy, which is where the AI decides which parts of its field of view are occupied by movers versus stationary objects or are entirely empty. We've covered how the AI predicts many possible paths for everything that moves and adjusts its own path accordingly. And finally, we talked about what Tesla does when it needs more data to train the AI in the first place, either for a specific edge case or in poor driving conditions or anything in between. And since Tesla's cars are technically robots on wheels, we actually covered some of the biggest innovations they shared for Optimus, not just their vehicle fleet. But there is one company that's racing Tesla for the full self-driving crown. And if you want to see how they could win, check out this episode next. And if you feel I've earned it, consider hitting those like and subscribe buttons, which lets me know to make more content like this. Either way, thanks for watching, and until next time, this is ticker symbol U. My name is Alex, reminding you that the best investment you can make is in you.